The Richard Roeper Show is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. The digital landscape is changing rapidly, and to compete in today's online business environment, you need an experienced partner. Since 1995, AmericanEagle.com has partnered with companies of all sizes, offering web design, web development, e-commerce, mobile apps, and digital marketing to drive your overall business's success, because they believe that today's online world is your online opportunity. Visit AmericanEagle.com to get started today. AmericanEagle.com. AmericanEagle.com. And I am in the AmericanEagle.com studios just outside the great city of Chicago. Happy to talk to you guys. There's so much going on. All kinds of TV moments that are creating all the buzz, all the viral moments, lots of controversy, back and forth. So we're going to talk about a bunch of these TV moments. And of course, I'll have some reviews for you as well. Breaking news. Well, breaking news, it's entertainment news, so everybody relax, including me. We talked just a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about the evolution of the game show host, right? That had the game show host used to be a game show host, and we had to say goodbye to some of the iconic veterans over the last couple of years, most of them living well into their 90s. We talked about how these days you get a lot of people who come from other walks of show business and sometimes surprisingly end up hosting game shows. And this one I think is maybe the most surprising of all, although I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm just kind of surprised this individual wanted to do it. This is the report from Variety, the Showbiz Bible. Martin Short is to host the Match Game revival on ABC. From Variety, Martin Short is expanding his relationship with Disney, signing on to host a revival of the famed gamer Match Game. Centers on 4 contestants competing for $25,000 as they try to match the answers of 6 celebrities in a game of fill in the blank. The format first premiered in 1962, hosted by Gene Rayburn. You can look up the old YouTube clips. You see, Gene Rayburn's got that long, skinny microphone. And there's always these double entendres on the Match Game, like in the 60s and the 70s. Very simple game, but, it works. And then they had the Alec Baldwin version, which had debuted, believe it or not, in 2016, ran for 5 seasons, then was canceled. And now Martin Short, the great Martin Short, who, of course, stars in Hulu's Only Murders in the Building, which also gets a secondary broadcast on ABC. All of this tied together under the Disney umbrella. And they mentioned in the Variety article that he helmed a daytime talk show in 1999, Martin Short. And I was on that talk show. It was about 6 months before I was named as the co-host of At the Movies, which became Eber and Roeper. I was actually promoting a book of mine about urban legends, and I was on the Martin Short daytime talk show. And he was one of the loveliest talk show hosts you could ever hope to meet, just like you'd expect, very funny and engaging and witty. And I'll never forget how flattered I was that Martin Short had clearly read the book. And I don't expect every talk show host, when I've been out promoting books, they read every book. I mean, sometimes, if you're hosting a daily show, almost every other day, you've got an author on. It's hard to keep up with that. And I can tell sometimes they just read the blurb or the PR materials, but he had clearly read the book, which I just thought was so cool. And he asked me afterward, he goes, Richard, I would love for you. This is not a Martin Short impersonation. This is just me recounting the conversation. But he said, I would just love for you to, if you could please sign this book, your book, and make it out to me. I'll keep it in I have a whole shelf of books signed by authors. And I'm like, what? This is so great. So Martin Short hosting the Match Game. And you think, this is one of the most talented and versatile performers of our times. And he's going to host the Match Game. And you think, geez, I don't want to say it's beneath him, but it's kind of surprising. But on the other hand, he'll be very funny at it. And he loves Martin Short. He's one of the great guests on talk show hosts and guest hosts. He's been a guest host for Jimmy Kimmel and other things. When he would go on Letterman, he would do special musical numbers. He always took it, the kind of showbiz tradition of doing memorable guest appearances, and then Jiminy Glick. All the stuff he's done through the years. He puts his heart and soul into it. And I love Martin Short. So I think he'll be great at this. And the money's always really good. And you know what? As we know, if you're in show business, you got to keep working. And I don't know anything about, I guess Martin Short, his wife passed away, I believe, a few years ago. And he's reportedly dating Meryl Streep now, former guest on Only Murders, right? And I do like the idea of Meryl Streep saying, you're going where now? The what is it called? The Match Game. Although, even though Meryl Streep is, very elegant and exquisite and critically and legendarily revered and all the Oscars and everything, don't think she takes herself that seriously, so I don't think that'll be a problem, but it is kind of an interesting match. Anyway, that's Martin Short. We wish him the best, all the contestants the best. Fill in the blank of the match game. Other things happening in the world. This is all this week. This has all happened. Some of this seems like it happened a month ago, even though it was like 3 days ago, because the news cycle is so fast now, and there's a new crazy story. Did you see the interview with President Donald Trump and Terry Moran of ABC News? It's interesting now, too, because all of these clips were put out there by ABC, not leaked, well in advance of the actual sit-down interview where you could watch the whole thing. And it's, as usual, if anybody questions Trump or criticizes Trump, he goes on the defensive. And Terry Moran pressed him on a few things, including this whole controversy about Kilmar Armando Abrigo Garcia, who was deported by the United States government to El Salvador. And this whole thing about whether or not he's in MS-13, MS-13, and Trump claiming that there's an MS-1 and 3 on his knuckles, and Terry Moran correctly pointing out, no, those were superimposed to say what the actual tattoos represent, whether they do or not. And Trump wouldn't let it go. And Moran was like, that was Photoshopped. It's very clearly, when you look at the tattoo, and I don't know whether or not those symbols actually represent other things, but the M, the S, the 1, and the 3 are like very basic Photoshopped, kind of like saying this is what this represents. And apparently Trump thinks that that's real. So they went back and forth. Let's listen to a little clip here where, and Trump does one of his classic moves where he'll say, I don't know who you are. You're nothing to me. In other words, I never even heard of you. Let's take a listen.
Get him out, and we're doing it. And you'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute.
Well, wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshopped.
That was Photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it was Photoshopped? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS, as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's fake news.
When he was photographed in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No,
but they're there
in your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
We'll take a look at that.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at that, sir.
Why don't you just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else.
It's contested.
And that happens a lot, even more so in the second term, where if anybody dares from the mainstream media, the so-called mainstream, whatever, a lot of people don't trust it. I still maintain and contend and know that the vast majority of mainstream reporters are actually solid journalists who do the work. And yes, some of them lean left and some of them lean right. But if you're working for MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever the case may be, you're a real journalist. And I know some people are scoffing at that, but trust me. Anyway, he'll do this thing where, in press conferences or on the Air Force One, if someone asks him anything like a challenging question, hey, what's going on with Putin? You said the war in Ukraine was going to be over immediately. You claimed that groceries were going to drop. He'll just start, his first thing is like, who you with? And then no matter who they say they're with, he goes, fake news. So he did this with Terry Moran and, immediately goes into the personal attack. And also just, he'll just say, he just keeps saying things over and over again. And then, so, in his world, travel is up, even though it's not up, and groceries are down, even though they're not down. But I don't want to, not here to do a big political rant to you guys. How I feel about most of these things. But to me, the interesting part we've always talked about on this podcast is the media filter of these things, how the media is manipulated, how the media does its own, sometimes it's manipulations and reportage. And it is fascinating to me Trump has time-honored techniques that he's been doing for years. He used to write letters to Spy Magazine and the New York Daily News and gossip columnist at Page 6 and New York Post. And, he'd circle things and point out errors, or he'd clip out positive articles about himself and send them in. He famously would call into different radio shows, pretending to be his own PR person. He's obsessed, obviously, with coverage of him. But the move works a lot, man. A lot of people were saying, oh, Terry Moran, you should have pressed him. And then a lot of people were like, oh, well, Terry Moran was lying. And I'm like, well, he was asking legitimate questions. And then a lot of people were saying, well, he should have followed up more and he let Trump steamroll him. Let me tell you, someone who's been in those situations and has interviewed a lot of people back in the days when I was a news journalist, it's very easy to say, he should have done this, should have done that. And it's legitimate sometimes, but it ain't easy, man. And, especially in the press conferences in the Oval Office, where now they have all these influencers sprinkled in who are not really asking questions, or just launching, giant heaps of praise Trump's way. But if you do ask a tough question, he'll either ignore it, he'll sidestep it. And then the other great move, and I'm saying this in terms of, working the media and working the public, he just moves on. Now, this was a one-on-one interview, so he couldn't move on, but he just kept saying, well, I don't, do I trust Putin? Well, I don't know if I trust you. And I don't know who you, I never even heard of you. And it's not easy to navigate your way through that. I had my own, I had a couple of encounters with Trump. I've talked about this in about 10 years ago, right around then on Twitter. I said something, and we had met a few times, and he'd always been nice to me. Very, like at public gatherings, Oscar parties and things like that, up fronts in New York. But whatever I said that was critical of him, he immediately responded on Twitter, you were the worst replacement in the history of showbiz. Talking about Martin Short, not replacing, but succeeding Alec Baldwin. People, come into these jobs. And of course, I had the job on at the movies after my friend Gene Siskel passed away, and I joined Roger on the show. And Donald Trump tweeted, worst replacement in the history of showbiz. Show was immediately tanking and canceled after you joined. And I wrote back, that's actually not true. We did 8 years. Ratings were pretty darn good. And I also said, that's funny because when you met me in person, you said that I was one of the greatest replacements in the history of show business. And he said, that's a lie. I don't know who you are, which is sort of weird to say to someone when you're tweeting back and forth. So then I posted a couple of photos of us. There's photos on Getty Images of me meeting this guy. And I said, well, here's some pictures of us meeting. And you were very complimentary. And his response was, keep dreaming, which is a great response. Because it's like, he's like essentially saying, keep dreaming like this never happened. But also it could be like, hey, keep dreaming, kid. You're going to do something someday. So it's fascinating to watch. If you get a chance, watch the entire interview with Terry Moran and President Trump and draw your own conclusions. Another fascinating interview that happened almost a week ago now. But people are still talking about the fallout from this. And this is, did you see the CBS Sunday morning interview with Bill Belichick and his girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, in the background? If you saw it, it's pretty amazing. Bill Belichick, no doubt about it, one of the greatest football minds that the game has ever known. He's got like 8 Super Bowl rings and defensive genius and put together all these championship teams. But also notorious. It was the worst interview ever in press conferences. On to Pittsburgh. I'm not going to talk about that. And he's actually a really engaging guy. People who know him, I don't know him, but I know he called into Howard Stern one time and he was really funny. And then you started seeing flashes of his personality after he parted ways with the Patriots, where he was pretty fun and engaging and going on some of these sports personality shows. Then he meets Jordan Hudson, who is slightly younger. Bill Belichick, 73, and she's, I think, 24. They met on a plane. That's the story. They met on an airplane. She was reading a book. They bonded over that. They became friends. Now they're seeing each other. Well, they're both adults. They can do what they want. But obviously, that's the kind of thing that's going to get a lot of attention, especially because there's pictures of him as a fisherman and she's a mermaid. She's young. She's an influencer. She's all about the social media. And he's kind of reluctantly going along with this stuff. So now Bill Belichick is promoting this book and doing this interview that gets really awkward because his girlfriend jumps in and says, we don't want to talk about how we got together. And now from the fallout, there's a lot of concern reportedly at the University of North Carolina, where he's taking a job because she's got some sort of unofficial or official PR consultant thing. And people are saying, this guy looks like he's in a hostage situation. That, of course, is hyperbole. But now she's sharing stuff in support of people who are supporting her. So like on X, somebody said nothing awkward about it. Imagine a private person wanting to keep their private life private. So this is someone defending her and she's liking that. And I'm like, listen, I'm all for that. But when you've made your life, your career and your notoriety about making your relationship public, you can't then say, oh, we want our privacy. It doesn't work both ways. So Bill Belichick's got to make a decision here at some point because he's a college coach. He's going to be coaching young men the same age as his girlfriend. And again, you know what? They can do what they want to do. But if you make it public, then it's going to be, it's going to be out there and you're going to get these weird things. And the interview was really weird and embarrassing. And Bill Belichick's in his sweatshirt with a hole in it, looking like he wanted to be anywhere but there. But it's like, well, don't do the interview then. And the girlfriend chiming in, that's why they included it in the interview, because it apparently happened more than once. And it's like, listen, you wrote a book, you want to publicize the book. People are going to ask you about more than just your feelings about the cover 2 defense. That's the way it works. Oh, and I wanted to talk about one more thing before we take a break in this world of viral TV crazy moments. Did you see the NBA playoffs, the Pacers and the Bucks? The Pacers eliminated the Bucks. Tyrese Haliburton, I believe, with the last minute layup. Then on the court afterwards, Haliburton's father, his father confronts Giannis on the court, has a sign and is getting in his face. And then I think we've got some audio of the press conference afterward where Giannis talked about getting confronted by a player's dad.
Losing the game, emotions run high, having a fan, which at the moment I thought he was a fan, but then I realized it was Tyrese's son, which I love Tyrese. I think he's a great competitor. He was his dad, sorry. Coming in the floor and showing me his son a towel with his face. This is what we do. This is what we effing do. This the F we do. This. I feel like that's very, very disrespectful. My dad, if you guys go and ask and learn, my dad's not with us no more. My dad used to come in the family room and was the most respectful person ever. When you come from nothing and you've worked your whole life to sell stuff in the street, and your whole life you'll be scared of the police of deporting you and sending you back to your country. You have to protect your kids with all means. You create this mentality of being humble your whole life, to not kind of disrespect anybody, not make the tension high, the emotions high, so anybody can snitch on you, say something bad about you. So when he came here, I remember I was like, Dad, why are you so humble? Why are you going to the family room? You don't even say a word. You sit in the back. Why are you like that? Don't worry about it. Don't worry. That's how I grew up. That's what I had around. So when I see other dads, which don't disrespect me, maybe if my son play basketball, I might be in the court. I might be the one on the court, and like 20 years later, you can play this interview and say, Giannis, you're contradicting yourself. But we'll see in 20 years. But I'm talking about right now how I feel. Having somebody's dad, which I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for his son, and I'm happy that he's happy for his son. That's how you're supposed to feel. But coming to me and disrespecting me and cursing at me, I think is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
Just such a class act. Great guy. All-time great player. And Tyrese Haliburton has said, I didn't know about this. Now that I do, I'm going to talk to my dad. I'm going to apologize to Giannis. But this brings up, I just wanted to get into this a little bit, guys. The larger issue here with the way things are going in our culture, in sports culture, where you have a fan at a Red Sox game heckling a player who had been very open about his issues with mental health and depression and suicide, and you get a fan who heckles him about that, which is unconscionable. You're an asshole if you do that. And you hope they get banned forever. And you think about the various sports. Now, baseball, you get some of that, but at least you have the net, and you have foul territory and the outfield walls, although we occasionally get these moments where some idiot with a glove is trying to steal a foul ball from a player. But there's a little bit of removal there. Football, of course, there's a whole lot of room between the sidelines and the front row. Front row of most football stadiums, unless you're in the end zone and you can see the action coming toward you. Much better seats are like 20 rows up, right? Because you can see the whole field. So in the NFL, there's a little bit of distance between fans and players. You'll get stuff in the tunnels sometimes when players are going through the tunnels and people will throw stuff or be assholes like that. Hockey, you have the glass. separating the fans in the front row. I've sat on the glass, by the way, at the United Center. Humble brag, just brag. When I was at a radio station that was covering the Blackhawks. And it's amazing. Those athletes, those hockey players, and even the officials, the way they skate, but the players in particular, and man, when they come crashing into the boards, it's an incredible game live. It's probably the biggest disparity between TV and live is hockey. And you'll get things occasionally, players will get into it, with fans behind the bench, but there's some removal there. But basketball, and in particular NBA basketball, when you're watching it, just kind of keep this in mind during the playoffs, guys. Think about the fact, and this is going on for generations now, but like they talk about those front row seats where your feet are on the wood, which means your feet are literally on the court. You're out of bounds, but barely, like inches. And you see that. And then, of course, all the photographers and everything. And every game, there's at least a dozen times where players go, tumbling into, usually it's by under the basket, but often it's, they smash into fans. A drink gets knocked over by a player diving for a ball. We had poor Tracy Morgan at that Knicks game last month. Got very sick. And when he threw up literally on the court because you're that close to the action. And I know it's really cool. And if you've ever had that, been lucky enough to have the experience, it is amazing. But it's also insane when you think about it. That they're, and they're not going to change it now because those front row seats, and of course you see at Knicks games in particular and Lakers games, it's Ben Stiller and it's Spike Lee and it's Timothée Chalamet and Emma Stone, whatever the case may be. I think, at various games, Bolts games, every team has its fans, but especially New York and LA, of course. But the regular, so to speak, the non-celebrity fans who often have those front row seats are paying a fortune for them, and second and third row, and it's a big prestige thing and a pecking order and all that shit. So they're not going to change it, but it's nuts when you think about it that you have these giant, super fast, super strong, mega athletes running around, and they literally, when they're inbounding the ball, their feet are like 2 inches from the foot of the feet of the fans, and I'm surprised there haven't been more serious injuries. And they could easily just say, let's move this back, 20 feet, and then just they do in some other arenas internationally, and they're not going to do it. But so, and of course, in the other sports, especially like with football and hockey, there's equipment and masks and helmets and things. And in baseball, you can see the players a lot easier, and in particular basketball. So almost every game now, we're seeing fans. And again, a lot of times, most of the time, it's like a 50-year-old man squeezing into his Luka's jersey or whatever. And it's like, why do you feel the need to make it about you and to heckle these players? And they love it because a lot of times the players will respond, and sometimes it gets nasty. And we even saw the video where players, I think it was it the Lakers bench where they found out that they were getting Luka, or different teams were finding out about the Luka Anthony Davis trade a couple of months ago, where players are finding out in real time from fans. And that's kind of fun, but it's insane. And the same thing's happening on the court. There's been huge fights going back to the 70s and 80s and 90s with the Bad Boys, Pistons, and Malice at the Palace and all that. But now, man, these players, every other moment, someone's taking a flop or someone's fighting somebody. And it's like, man, it's such a beautiful game. And it's a physical game, but I wish everybody just take a step back. And if your dad's going to the game and you're in the NBA, tell him not to run on the court with a sign. Take your victory graciously. All right, we got to take a break and talk about Portillo's. All right, we're going to talk about Portillo's. You guys know the drill here. They're known for their famous Chicago hot dogs with all the famous correct Chicago ingredients, right down to that poppy seed bun. But there's so much more. They got great burgers. You can get Italian sausage, Italian beef, amazing French fries. Also some really good salads. Don't shortchange the salads at Portillo's. And then, of course, you top it off with the legendary, the one and only chocolate cake. I know people who order the entire cake for birthdays and other occasions, but you can also get a slice, which will probably last you 2 helpings because it's amazing. And always, of course, you keep the cake at room temperature. That's how they do it at Portillo's. That's how you want to consume it. Now, there are Portillo's in many locations across the country, but you can also order online and ship it via Portillos.com. You can find a location near you, order online. Portillo's, Portillos.com, Portillos.com.
I was in high school when the Avengers came. kind of strange that it's all over now. No one's coming to save the day.
I think we are. We can be the ones that are coming.
Buck, you have the wrong people. We have all done bad things.
Look, I've been where you are. The past doesn't go away. So you can either live with it forever, or you can do something about it.
We can't stop him alone. No one can. But we can find a way. Together.
All right, little audio there from Thunderbolts, the new Marvel movie. And it's Thunderbolts, by the way, there's a little asterisk next to the Thunderbolts. And you know how sometimes you get those movie titles like 7, where it's the number 7, where the V is and things like that, or Megan, where they do that kind of. Well, Thunderbolts is an asterisk. There's actually a reason for that, which I won't give away. But, so the story of the Thunderbolts movie, I'm giving it 3 stars, by the way. It's uneven but entertaining. It, of course, like all these movies, it's got all kinds of tie-ins to previous characters and different tributaries of the Marvel universe, but it actually does work. And I know this is one of the intentions as they move forward into chapter 57 or whatever it is of the Marvel universe, that you could watch this movie and not know anything about the Avengers or very little and seen some of the Avengers movies. And it's kind of a standalone. So the Thunderbolts, they're a bunch of anti-heroes. Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, John Walker, the Winter Soldier we're talking about. We're talking about the sort of cut rate Captain America. All these characters who are not considered to be A-list. First of all, they're not considered to be A-list in the Marvel canon, but in this actual world, they're not as well. And they all get thrown together. And it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus's Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who's the main villain there, government official, CIA. And she's working on this new super serum that's going to create a super soldier even more immortal and powerful than anything Captain America or the Winter Soldier have ever seen, who then kind of turns sideways. And we've seen this plot before where the megalomaniacal government official or criminal wants to control the world, and they start messing around with human experimentation, and it goes sideways, and you're going to get a lot of big CGI action sequences. What I liked most about Thunderbolts actually is this theme throughout of it is again not something brand new in superhero movies, but that these characters, these anti-heroes, come from places of trauma, domestic turmoil, and sometimes they're the victims, or they're survivors, if you will, of abuse, and they don't have any self-worth, and they don't trust each other, but they have to band together. So Thunderbolt starts off as very lighthearted, kind of zippy, fun, lots of quipping and banter, and the stakes are relatively low. This is not one of those things where Thanos is going to snap his fingers and half the population disappears. I mean, there's still life and death, of course. But then it takes this dark turn as we literally go into the minds and the memories and the subconscious goings on with these various characters, and we see the traumas of their past. It gets pretty heavy, and then it knows when to kind of get out of that and to go into the more standard action fare. So I think it's a good step for the Marvel Universe. I think it's also indicative of the fact that we probably should come to terms with the reality that the golden age of the superhero movie, and whether we're talking about DC or Marvel, whatever the case may be, I think is essentially mid 2000s, early 2000s with the various Spider-Man movie, and of course Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight movies, and some of the other great Avengers films, and Wolverine's arc, all the way up to the final chapter, the Endgame. So for about a 15-year period, from the early 2000s to the late 2010s, I think that's going to be always considered, or will be eventually considered, the golden age. Superhero movies are never going away. We have stuff planned for the 20s, the 2030s, you name it. And that's okay, because maybe now, there's still events, but expectations are a little bit tampered. And we've had some really bad ones in recent years as well. So it's nice to see a good step in the right direction. Thunderbolts, good time at the movies. Unfortunately, another follow-up film turned out to be a real disappointment. That's Another Simple Favor. And I love the original. I love these kind of dark and twisty murder mysteries, whether we're talking about the various miniseries, Nicole Kidman and the rest, Big Little Lies and all that kind of stuff. Perfect Couple. But the first Simple Favor. So, remember Blake Lively? She was Emily Nelson, and Anna Kendrick was Stephanie Smothers. Quite a name for a mom. And she had this kind of mom crush on Blake Lively's character. And then there were all these twists and turns, and a twin sister and murder.
Emily, how are you here?
I'm getting married.
Will you be my maid of honor? Did I mention it was in Capri?
Capri? Yes, she is in. We're all in.
Why am I here?
You think I want to make you pay for stealing my life? To old friends, new beginnings?
And not getting poisoned.
And it was really, really well done. And they were both really terrific in this. In the original. So you had a Simple Favor. I think there's like 4 Simple Favor books. I don't know how closely, honestly, they followed the plots in the movies. But so now we have another Simple Favor. And I give them credit for not saying a Simple Favor 2. They actually came up with a creative sequel title. Another Simple Favor. Which picks up with Emily, who has been convicted in the first film. She's released from prison. And she invites Stephanie to be the maid of honor at her lavish wedding in Capri. And Stephanie goes along. So now we go to Italy, and it's beautifully filmed. And the reasons Emily got out of prison don't really make sense. They don't really play out. And then once we get to Capri, and it is gorgeous looking, we have one twist after another, and there's lots of murder, and there's lots of intrigue. And I know it's not meant to be taken seriously, but it makes The White Lotus look like a documentary series about true crime. It just keeps they keep piling on the twists. The main twist that's coming, if you know anything about the original, you're not going to be surprised at all. They make it to be this big this big reveal, shocking. And I'm like, Blake Lively looks amazing. They have her in these crazy fashions, like she's at the Met, like on the red carpet on the runway of the Met. Like they're so over the top and fantastic. Anna Kendrick is really funny. They're good together, but they're kind of rehashing the same relationship. And now the body count is piling up, and there's some stuff involving children that I found to be kind of borderline tasteless. But the end game here is like, if you're going for pure escapism, for about an hour it works, and then the last hour it's just so over the top, and they cram so much in there that it's a crushing disappointment. And they're setting it up for a third entry, a third chapter, and I think we'd be okay if we didn't have that. Go back and watch the original. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the podcast. I'll talk to you guys again soon.